The hunter becomes the hunted as the ghoul sets its sights on the cannibals who once feasted on him. Convention dictates that monsters of the same rank avoid confrontation, and humans seldom linger in dungeons. But Chrome, it seems, is no conventional hero. He feasts on the flesh of the defeated ogre, musing that he's merely 2 levels away from his next evolution. As if responding to his thoughts, a formidable adversary materializes before him. A level 21 gargoyle, a creature that has no business being in this part of the dungeon. His journey continues, fraught with challenges and filled with unexpected turns. A volley of fire was her weapon of choice, with her swordplay a force to reckon with. He was perpetually on the defense, dodging each attack with precision. The monstrous entity was relentless, its eyes glued to him, matching his every move with an aggressive counterattack. Chrome, however, managed to outmaneuver the creature, leading it to the cliff's edge. He feigned a fall, only to grasp the ledge at the last moment, tricking the monster into plummeting into the abyss. Then, like a specter, a ghoul dashed after her, its claws slashing the air before pinning her to the ground. Chrome's level had ascended to the formidable 20th. Evolution awaited at the next stage. Eagerly, Chrome dashed towards a nearby lake. Curiosity piqued about the transformation he would undergo. Would he appear more human this time? Evolution struck, transforming him into a C-rank mimic, taller and adorned with an unremovable mask. Along with his new form came a new skill. He was a reincarnated mimic, an undead impersonating humans before launching his attack. Rumor had it that no one had lived to tell the tale of what lay beneath his mask. This made him far more threatening than any ghoul. Despite the cost to his mana reserves, Chrome eagerly tested his new skill, transforming into a human figure, albeit with an enigmatic mask attached to his temple. The skill, however, drained his mana significantly, allowing only 4 hours of use with his current reserve. Living within the city was unfeasible. His path was clear. He had to continue leveling up and evolving. Suddenly, the earth beneath him convulsed in a violent quake, dislodging stones in its wake after a few minutes. The ground stilled, leaving a question hanging in the air. What had just occurred? Rumors whispered of a colossal monster's remains, buried deep within the dungeon. The dungeon, a malevolent creation born of his dark mana, teems with life. In the unexplored corners where adventurers seldom tread, anomalous phenomena become a common sight. This indicates a dangerous overpopulation of monsters. Perhaps this surge in monstrous life is the cause of the recent earthquakes, forcing the rank C beasts to alter their territories. It appears we are just witnessing the onset of chaos. Suddenly, as if summoned, another gargoyle emerges from a hidden crevice, catching our hero off guard. It launches a fiery attack towards the unsuspecting mimic. However, the mimic not only deflects the assault, but also retaliates, swiftly eliminating its foe. The mimic's victory comes easier this time, as it has grown stronger and more adept at predicting these creatures' repetitive attacks. Despite their ferocity, the gargoyle's lack of human-like intelligence results in reckless, indiscriminate attacks. Now, with his rank and resistance to dark energy boosted, Chrome is poised to delve deeper into the dungeon. Gargoyles, once formidable adversaries, no longer seem to pose a significant threat. However, their loyalty to their fallen comrade is evident as they swarm towards the sounds of their dying kin, forcing Chrome to retreat from the battlefield. As the monsters start venturing beyond their usual habitats, a significant spike in their power levels is noticeable. Something sinister is undoubtedly brewing within the dungeon. Our hero, meanwhile, continues his relentless battle against these creatures, his level steadily rising. His superior physical attributes, deadly claws and fangs, and impressive endurance, all contribute to a formidable combatant that far surpasses any ordinary human. With the next evolution milestone set at level 50, he hopes to finally escape this dark abyss. But the once rare C-rank monsters are becoming increasingly common. In the past, only those of deep rank, or perhaps even lower, inhabited these shadowy depths. The burgeoning issue at hand has its roots in overpopulation and predates even the rise of the ogre menace. If left unattended, the creatures of the underworld will breach the surface, laying waste to neighboring territories. The only viable solution is to vanquish the dungeon's master, dwelling deep within its bowels. In an unexpected twist, human footsteps echo through the dungeon's corridors. Level 20 witnesses the arrival of Frank Frey, with Guido Gillette appearing on the 19th, and Shelley Schultz on the 18th. Our heroes deliberate on the unsettling emergence of higher-level monsters. Their plan? Not only to alert the guildmaster, but to challenge and defeat the dungeon's overlord. Chrome, however, deems it safer to withdraw. Frank engages in a spirited debate with Guido, arguing that their numerical strength isn't the primary concern at this juncture. The future may not present a more opportune moment, though Guido counters this sentiment, expressing doubts over their ability to handle the burgeoning monster population. In the end, the evolving monsters, their levels and appearances shifting, now possess an arsenal of unpredictable attacks. Frey's focus, it seems, lies solely on profiting from the materials they drop. Yet their duty is to safeguard humanity, and failure to quell this monstrous uprising could lead to catastrophic consequences. Shelley shares a hauntingly familiar tale. His own hometown was ravaged by a similar event, much like Chrome's. While Chrome managed to restore his home, Shelley's still lay in ruins. However, their conversation is abruptly cut short as Galato spots a mimic's paw, promptly launching an arrow at the target, utilizing his hunter's god's eye skill. As one, the heroes launch their offensive, and the mimic is forced to draw upon his abilities. As they brandish their swords at the stone, a man suddenly springs from his seat, hands shooting up in surrender. He feigns innocence, claiming to be an adventurer who mistook them for bandits, choosing to hide rather than confront. Guido, however, is skeptical. The man's jittery voice and suspicious demeanor fail to inspire trust, so Guido stays alert, ready to let loose another arrow. Meanwhile, Frank is equally unconvinced, finding the man's claim of being an ordinary adventurer hard to swallow. The use of the skill, it seems, has only deepened their suspicion. Frank, though more amicable, questions the man's uninjured state despite the recent skill usage. Judging by his threadbare attire, he must have been in the dungeon for several days. So where is his team? What level is he? What is his purpose here? Chrome perceives that the longer they scrutinize each other, the narrower his path becomes to fabricate satisfactory answers. Suddenly, a young girl rushes forward, bombarding him with questions about his welfare and expressing concern about his solitude in the dungeon. Unlike the others, she appears unafraid, even declaring, based on a mere glance, that he must be a good person. She kindly invites him to join their party to navigate his way out of the labyrinthine dungeon. The mimic, however, declines her offer and hastily retreats. Regardless of whether he's a criminal, chasing after him is not advisable. Everyone played their part in this unfortunate misunderstanding. Guido was hasty in revealing his intentions, while Shelley was overly naive and trusting. Despite this, the archer ultimately agrees to join the others in challenging the dungeon boss. They were resolute in their decision to prevent history from repeating itself. Lame, who had previously managed to flee, met a tragic end a week prior, transformed into a monster. Abandoned by his own team, he was left to perish. The girl's genuine concern for him was the first he'd experienced in a long time. Perhaps he should trail behind them, he mused, to observe their combat strategies. Eventually, the heroes arrive at the den of the beast. The 30th level Gargoyle King makes its grand appearance. An immense creature that induces fear just by its sheer size, it possesses a colossal eye embedded in its solar plexus, which opens with a repulsive, loathsome sound. The pupil of this grotesque eye shoots a menacing glare at the heroes. As the king growls, his own eyes ignite with what appears to be infernal flames. This ominous display promises nothing good. With a roar that shakes the cavern, the Gargoyle King crosses his dual swords, his serrated teeth primed to rip apart the trio who dared to oppose him. Shelley gazes at the creature's formidable level 30 ranking, a cold knot of fear settling in her stomach. This was far beyond what they had anticipated, and they were woefully unprepared. Yet, retreating isn't in Shelley's nature. She is not one to back down at the first sight of adversity. Frank orders Schultz to follow his lead, signaling that he'll take the vanguard in the assault. Shelley silently acquiesces with a resolute nod. Frey, ever the strategist, cautions against prolonging a battle with a foe that outmatches them so drastically. Quick, decisive action is paramount. Gripping his weapon tightly, he channels his mana into it. Boldly, he launches his attack on the Gargoyle King, employing his signature cutting wave skill. The monstrous beast effortlessly parries the assault, a reaction Frey had anticipated, Yet, it creates an opening for a subsequent attack. The commander lifts his sword overhead, aiming to strike once more, hoping for a different outcome. But his attempt proves futile. A flash of sparks erupts from the clash, and Frank's dismay is palpable. He hadn't even managed to mar the king's tough hide. That's when Shelley springs into action, seizing the opportunity she had been waiting for. Charging forward without a hint of fear, she knows that the monster's strength is formidable, but his speed is lacking. The Gargoyle King drops his guard once more, and the girl strikes with a swift, sharp swing of her sword. Another bright flash illuminates the cavern. Yet her effort, much like those before, yields no result. An arrow launching from his bow aimed directly at the monstrous king. But the pointed arrowhead shattered upon impact, behaving more like fragile glass than the iron it was forged from. Gilland, soaked in a cold, fear-induced sweat, grimly accepted their hopeless situation. The rest of the team shared his sentiments. Their arrows were futile against the king's impenetrable defense. Frank, his breath ragged from the relentless onslaught, calculated their chances of victory, only to arrive at a grim realization. This monstrous adversary had formidable defenses, but moved sluggishly. However, even with this weakness, their enemy was too resilient. Their traditional weapons, swords and arrows, were rendered useless against such armor. Their only shot at damage seemed to be the king's exposed eyeballs. The monster was not patient enough to let them regroup. He brandished his enormous sword, striking a powerful blow against the team's commander. Frey barely held on, gritting his teeth in pain, his mind racing to formulate a strategy amidst the chaos. If he failed to devise a plan, they risked leaving the dungeon empty-handed, or worse, not leaving at all. The monster's predatory gaze settled on Frank, and suddenly, the floor beneath them glowed a sinister red. Frey found himself standing at the center of a luminescent star, encased within a perfectly symmetrical circle. He appeared minuscule in comparison to the monstrous king. The sudden illumination beneath him sent Frank into a frenzy, realizing that the king wielded magic, a development that did nothing to improve their dire circumstances. Unleashing his fiery roar ability, the monster was engulfed in a vortex of flames. A wave of scarlet fire thrust Frank back, flinging him several meters away. Emerging from the dust, Frey staunchly grips his bleeding arm. His sleeve, half charred, barely conceals the wound underneath. His breath, heavy and strained, forms clouds of steam in the chilly air. He glances back at his comrade Shelley. From the outside, she seems unscathed, but her faltering confidence is clear as day. Time is of the essence, and the ticking clock echoes ominously in Frey's mind. Their chances of escaping the underworld alive are dwindling with each passing second. Frank, his hand tightened around his sword, knows he must remain steadfast. As a leader, he can't afford to show any signs of weakness. If he lets them glimpse a shred of doubt, of the possibility they might not win, their morale will crumble. Retreat is not an option. Swinging his sword, Frank employs the cutting wave skill, the surrounding space shimmering with an ethereal blue glow. Sensing an opportunity that might not come again, Frey decides it's time to act. Fearlessly, he launches himself into the heart of the flaming chaos. Shelley, her courage flaring against her fear of death, yells after him. Has he really decided to use that last resort tactic? The monster bellows in fury, and in response, Frey unleashes his most powerful attack, decapitation. Few monsters survive this lethal blow. His sword arcs through the air, trailing blue lightning, while the flames greedily consume the oxygen around him. In a swift turn, he signals to Guido to initiate his part of the plan. Guido swiftly nocks an arrow, shouting in disbelief at the commander's reckless behavior. Nonetheless, the arrow is loosed from the bowstring, cleaving the air, bathed in a vibrant green light. A bolt finds its mark, embedded in the regal blue eye of the king, positioned precisely in the midst of the gargoyle's stomach, which it appears he purposely left exposed. Frank sticks his landing, relief washing over him at the prospect of a full-on assault at last. The only task left is to strike the decisive blow, allowing them to relish the taste of victory. But it's too early to let down their guard. The commander's eyes remain intently focused on the king's every move. The monster appears irked by the fact that it could still sustain damage. The king hurls a wave of crimson magic at a man desperately trying to defend himself with a sword. With a swift motion, the king disarms him, causing Frank to stumble and collapse. The commander's body lies still, yet the faint rhythm of his breath offers a glimmer of hope. Guido, recognizing the dire situation, instructs the girl to leave their fallen leader behind and flee. The king towers over Frank, preparing to deal the final blow. Yet Shelley is not one to retreat so readily, especially not when it comes to abandoning her trusted ally. With unyielding courage, she positions herself between the monster and Frank. The sight of Shelley, standing tall against the formidable opponent, makes her seem like an insect. Guido watches her with a scowl, frustrated by her stubbornness, even as he readies another arrow. Moments later, Shelley still stands in defiance of the king, though now she kneels. Blood trickles down her face as she leans on her sword, staving off the exhaustion threatening to pull her down. Behind her, Guido lies unmoving. His arrows are scattered, his bow resting a short distance from his outstretched hand, recently slipped from his grasp. As she gasps for breath, Shelley acknowledges that even though she couldn't prevent Frank's foolhardy assault, which nearly cost him his life, she won't allow him to perish here. Shelley's teeth grind together in a fierce display of regret. If only she had chosen to flee earlier, it's far too late now for such a belated surrender. She offers a remorseful apology to Guido, the lone voice of caution among them, who had initially been against this confrontation with the beast. Gilland, battered and bruised, slumps on the gritty earth. Propped up on his elbows, he responds, asking Shelley to silence her self-deprecating talk. His eyes flutter close. He harbors no blame, no resentment. After all, it was Guido's decision to engage, and Shelley should not shoulder the weighty guilt alone. Gilland's consciousness fades, leaving his life hanging in a precarious balance, too weak to discern between life and death. A stunned Schultz observes him. Schultz finds herself silently thanking Gilland for his support, even if their relationship might have been strained. As the king raises his hand to dispatch the last standing enemy, Shelley, once impulsive in battle, now understands her limitations. She can't win this fight alone. Resigned to her fate, she closes her eyes, accepting the inevitable defeat. As the gargoyle's crushing blow descends, a figure behind her retrieves Frank's abandoned sword. Moments pass, yet Schultz remains unscathed. Confusion floods her as she cautiously peels open her eyes, trying to comprehend her miraculous survival. Before her stands Chrome, with a resolute declaration that he can't stand idly by while his comrades fall. Grasping the sword hilt and blade, he withstands the monster's blow, teeth gritted against the force. Mimic's voice reverberates across the battlefield, announcing his stand against the stone menace. He won't let his comrades fight this battle alone any longer. Schultz's face is a mosaic of bruises and abrasions, but she seems indifferent to them. Her arm, too, appears to be hurt, given the way she's gingerly cradling it. Shelley spots a familiar mask, the visage of the man they'd encountered earlier. Against all odds, Guido is still conscious, albeit barely hanging on. He manages to lift his head, questioning why their mysterious savior decided to intervene. Chrome, haunted by a sigh of regret and a tinge of discontent, recalls his reasons. Before this moment, he was alone in the cave, his head bowed in contemplation. He'd recognized the inherent risk in trailing the team. The revelation of his true nature, a monster, the very kind adventurers eradicate daily, would be swift. Facing all three of them in battle was not something he desired, especially as they didn't seem inherently evil. However, Chrome refused to let his uncertainty overcome him. What was he contemplating anyway? Rising abruptly from the cold cave floor, his thoughts realign. This wasn't about morality, it was about his own desires and autonomy. This is why he, a mimic, yearned to be an adventurer. Whether in this life or the previous, the innate urge to protect others had always been his driving force. But fate, in its cruel humor, hadn't bestowed upon Chrome any exceptional talents or skills. He dreamt of vanquishing monsters and shielding innocence. Shelley, Guido, and Frank were risking their lives to safeguard countless others. Why then should Chrome shrink back, cower, and forsake them? He had the power to aid them, and without becoming a liability in the process. Dashing urgently towards the direction his team had vanished, Chrome is desperate to lend them aid. His mind can't help but circle back to the daunting figure of the Gargoyle King before him. He had managed to land a blow, yet their disparity in strength was undeniably overwhelming. Their failure to overcome the beast, despite their battle-hardened experience, was hardly a surprise. The creature stood at a formidable level 30, while Chrome was merely at level 21. The Gargoyle King boasted 44 units of mana, dwarfing Chrome's scant 23. Despite drawing on his mana for his reincarnation skill, Chrome barely keeps up, his sword clashing against the king's with increasing difficulty. A stream of curses escapes him as he reels backward, almost toppling over. A bitter realization dawns on him. He cannot vanquish this foe alone. Could he dare hope for assistance from the injured Guido and Shelley? The rational choice would be to flee, but their dire circumstances offer little hope. Frank could potentially bring aid, but would he have the strength left to assist Schultz and Gilland? Despite their desperate struggle, the humans had inflicted some damage on the beast. A wound marred its head, and its stomach eye, a known weak point, was also injured. Like his predecessors, Chrome recognizes the vulnerable stomach eye as the beast's Achilles heel. The king's sword strikes Chrome square in the chest, pushing him backward yet again. The creature seems to smirk, taking pleasure in its successful assault. A spray of scarlet blood erupts from Chrome's chest wound, painting the battleground. Shelley's horrified scream echoes around them, declaring the wound as potentially fatal, while Guido marvels at Chrome's resilience. A flash of green sparks in Chrome's eyes, signaling the activation of one of his abilities. The gargoyle roars in fury, confronted with an adversary who, despite his injuries, refuses to yield. And Chrome does not disappoint. He rallies, brandishing his weapon with renewed vigor. He may be battered, but he is far from broken. His focus sharpens, his target clear, the beast's blue eye,